Hello there, welcome to D&D for You. My name is Terrence Stang, and today we're going to be talking about coastlines and continents and the importance they have in map making. Welcome, new DMs and old DMs. Today we are talking map making and the importance of continents. Basically, when you start to design your continents, they are your world. They are literally the design of your world that you're putting everything else on, which makes them the most important beginning step. When you start off, the shape of your continents, where they are on the map, where they are on the planet, if it's a flat planet, that might be different, is basically going to be determine where your mountains go, how your rivers run, and it will also help determine where your biomes are. In a general world setup, you're going to have the northern area kind of normally be a more barren place, but also colder. And kind of same with the south. This isn't for every world, but this is the general Earth-like layout. But you don't have to follow that. That is not required. Either ways, the location of your continents and the size and look of them are going to will be determining all of your setup. And basically, these mountains, these different kind of areas actually within your continent are also going to be determining what kind of kingdoms there are, the barriers between the kingdoms, the different types of creatures that lives there, like dwarves and mountains, and the different types of monsters that live in that area. Like, you're not going to find a seafaring, like aboleth in your small lake by your town, unless you really want to throw it out there, and I encourage you to change things up. But in general D&D sense, you're not going to find an aboleth in a small lake in town. And so that's what bays are for, or your brass dragons. Brass dragons like to live on the edges of your coastlines, and you're not going to really find them in the center of a large continent. And so when you have these bay areas coming into the continent, kind of like this helps kind of basically immerse the players, give them something to look at, and give your monsters locations to live at, and for the players to encounter these creatures. Okay, so now that I've gone over that basic stuff, let's get into the actual designing of maps. Okay, so, for this next part, I like to use a certain tool. Let me come over here, go to my bookmarks, and go to my Fantasy World. Agra's Fantasy Map Generator is an amazing tool that I found and love to use. This really helps you give ideas of kind of continent shapes, and I'll show you more about that in my actually Inkarnate maps area. But it generates completely random worlds, as you can see here. Like, look at this. I can come up here and I can hit generate new map right here. Okay, so when I generate a new map, give it a second to load. It basically kind of gives you these continent shaped like areas, and this can really help you if you're struggling coming up with a continent shape. You can always try this. I would start with this if you don't want to actually try to make the continent, but I'm going to show you how to actually make your own continent and tips on how to actually make it look good if you don't want to use this tool. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. I really put a lot of effort into these videos, and I'm probably going to be doing a video on this tool later on and all the customization and everything that it has. So something else you can do with this tool, and you'll find that this is kind of what I've done here, is you can also basically copy the image of that tool's maps, and if you find continent that you like, then post it over your actual Inkarnate world, and then work from that point. You can see right here, I had actually started to basically outline this area and basically fill it in. Now, I know that this kind of looks weird, but I actually never finished filling in these details. But you could fill in the details kind of like down here, and this really helps you actually create this continent, like nice shaped continent feeling. Okay, so I'm gonna actually create a whole new map for you guys and kind of show you my step-by-steps into creating a continent. So we're gonna be going with a world. Right here now. If you do not have Inkarnate, I actually have Inkarnate Pro, but if you don't have it, don't worry, because they have a free version. This actual placing down land and actually working with the tool is all the same. The Pro version just has more assets. And I'm also actually in their their beta release. I'm sorry if I forgot. I'll throw an insert in later. But basically, I actually have their beta for their 1 point. I have early release. I'm gonna tell you. I'll insert it somewhere on this area what I'm forgetting. But basically, if yours does not look like this, don't worry about it. The same ideas are gonna apply. If you've got the free version, or if you have the not upgraded version, don't worry about it. Same steps are gonna apply here. Okay, so when starting out your continent, think of a basic shape that you want. Now, before we get in actually creating a map, there are a couple things that we need to go over. There are basically 3 different kinds of maps that you need to know when creating your continents. Number 1 are the ocean heavy maps. And I can show that here by Googling Inkarnate maps, right? So your ocean heavy maps here, if I go to images, are going to be 20 to 30% land and the rest is going to be water. A good example of a ocean heavy map are going to be your islands, or like this type of map right here. This is actually almost a 50-50%, not quite there. Here's an ocean heavy map. This right here is very ocean heavy. Now the thing about the ocean heavy is this is a lot of the time used for your islands or your broad areas of like your whole world map. But a lot of open water is not super interesting. So basically, moving on to the next type of map, you have your 50-50% land and water, or your 60-40% land and then water. And a really good examples are really all of these right here. Like this one right here. So this one is actually a 50-50 water versus land. And whoever made this, I will figure it out and put it down bottom right there. Did an excellent job at actually making this continent. You can see over here his basically bay and island area, and up to the north the cold area of his world. And you can see how you've got these different bays in here and a nice mixture of water and land. Remember, water is lazy. Basically, water falls into the holes in the world. And so if you get, let's say, if you have this bumpy terrain, right? That water is going to fill up the lower ends. That's why we have lakes and then rivers flowing between these bodies of water. So this continent is geologically higher than the water around it. And it's like protruded like out of the crust of the earth, or whatever planet you have here. And that is what really defines a continent. So remember, water is always going to be lazy and go into the sunken parts of your continents. And sometimes, like right here, you're going to have this great lake in the center, or this great lake with an island in the center, depending on what you have. A good example of this would be a volcano that basically erupted, kind of growing into the center of this and kind of falling out, and then as time went on, it eroded around as water came off of that mountain and eroded around that volcano, and then you have this lake around this massive volcano. That's another way. And then basically from there we move on to our island or land heavy maps. These are going to be stuff like this right here, or you're going to basically get stuff like this, your land heavy maps. Now, the land heavy maps can be used in continents, but generally you want to have at least 50-50 or 60-40 when making your continent maps. In scale kingdom maps, perfectly fine to use all land, but don't ever do that for a continent or or your main continent. At least have one section of water, or least 2 or 3 actually is what it's good to go for if you want to draw the out shape of your continent. So also something else, when you get these big land masses, as seen in the picture here, you see this guy has some really nice kind of like, because of this lake in here, he has a lot of water in here. But if you just get a solid landmass that is like 80% land, then you need to remember there's not a lot of water in the center of this area. That's why places like Australia or the center of the United States are deserts or actually just overall, they're deserts in the center, is because all the water is on the outside of the continent. And if you don't have those dipped down areas in the center or lakes in the center, your deserts are going to be in the center of your continents. Australia, as I said, is a really good example of this. Let me pull up Australia. So you can see this right here. As I click on this is kind of the inhabitants of the actual Australia. Look, the center is all desert. That's because all the water can't make it to the center. So if you don't put any lakes in your continent, remember that's going to be mostly to almost all desert on the inside. Now this is going to be variated between if you are up north or down south on the center of your planet, or if it's a flat Earth for that matter. But always remember, generally it's going to be all desert in the center if you don't have any bodies of water in there. Okay, so now getting to actually making a continent. There are multiple steps that you want to follow when actually making a continent, and I'm going to pull up this book here, which really goes over it really well, and actually making your continents. So I'm going to flip to this page. Now I can't show it because it's, obvious copywriting, but I can show it on here. So basically, when making your continent, you're going to want to make your central kind of look to the continent. And so I'm going to scale mine down a little bit. Now, this right here, the shape part right here, rough shape, is something that this program already does as an upgraded version. But you might not have that if you have the free Inkarnate version. So I'm actually going to use the solid line. So anyways, moving on, let's come up with a good shape for a continent. I'm going to go with something kind of like, I'm going to go with something kind of like this for the actual continent I want to have. Kind of like a backwards Africa kind of look. Or a potato look is another way you could say it. And then I'm going to have some, I need to kind of bring that down. Have some longer versions down here kind of wrapping around this area. And then maybe an island in here, this is my setup here. So, I'm going to focus on detailing this one right here. Basically what you're going to do is this is the general shape you have. Now what you're going to do is you're going to actually go through there and you are going to actually cut out the edges in there, as you can see I'm doing here, and that will roughen up the edges and kind of give it a really well, basically kind of feeling to the continent. It'll feel more Earth-like. Remember, the more Earth-like, the more realistic it is, the better and more believable the map is. Okay, so after you get to that point of actually roughing up your edges, you're going to want to go in there and add your islands and lakes. Remember, every single continent is going to have some sort of islands outside of it, and normally these islands are linked together in actual pieces, kind of like a chain of islands. Because think about it as you have this bulk like rock area with these parts that spurt up and make your islands. Basically, you would see if you covered the United States in water, the mountains would be your islands. And so when you have a mountain chain, thus there's your island chain. It's the tips of these mountain ranges on the bottom of the seabed poking out of the ground, and that is going to be your islands. And so these oftentimes spurt off of the edges of your actual continents or around it. But don't ever just put one island by itself. That never happens. Now if in your fantasy world, if you have a reason for why it's by itself, it's perfectly fine. But general rule is don't ever have an island by itself. Have a chain of them or multiple of them. So after you've added your lakes and your outside, or your coastline, you're kind of seeing the idea of the actual continent shape you want. And once you have your islands, your coastlines, and your lakes, then you can start to add in mountain ranges. Remembering that the lakes are the bottom. They are the lowest parts of your continent. Unless there are some cases where, lakes can be higher up. But you will have to decide when actually making that. So yeah, you can see that here. That I have a lake right here, and then you can see that I can place mountains around this actual edge right here. And then make sure to remember that's green around these water areas. So don't put a desert around a lake and don't add any greenery in there. Especially a Great Lake. There aren't deserts around Great Lakes. That doesn't really happen. But if you do want to turn something like that into basically a desert area, then that lake's gonna have to dry up, which is oftentimes where deserts come from, is giant dry lakes. So that's something else to think about when creating your continents. So, in basically reviewing what we've gone over how to do the coastlines, the different types of actual coastlines that you can have, the lakes, and the different kind of continent maps you can have. And then I will be, as I said, doing a review of the Asgard actual map making program. And also, I'm going to announce that I'm going to be making a basically younger DM to older DM, or noob DM to pro DM. That's kind of a harsh word, but noob DM to pro DM, basically helper guide to really help new DMs really get into their idea along with this map making. This was my this is the first video of this type, so if it's a little rough, bear in mind I'll get better as I go. Anyways, I just want to thank you for watching, and keep DMing. That's all I can say. I don't have an actual intro or actually outro, but I will have one at some point. So remember, keep DMing every day. Don't give up. Stay motivated. Oh! That's what I forgot. I want to show you guys something. Really quick. Every one of you guys have to know who Mr. Beast is. I just want to show you something. Mr. Beast. I just want to show you this. Right here, Mr. Beast has a 2-minute long video 5 years ago that only has 7.1k views. That's only 7,000 views. I mean, out of his hundreds and hundreds of millions, actually billions of views, this one only has 7.1k views, called Motivation. If you guys are basically having trouble building up motivation to actually continue your YouTube channel or even start one, go look at Mr. Beast's channel. That, I can't show the video, but that is a very motivational, basically seeing where he is now and seeing where he started. That's a very motivational what he says in there. And there's also another one here. And I'll link this actually in the channel, in the description below. But there's another one that basically he talks about his YouTube dream here and famous YouTubers. But he talks about him being able to see basically him as a famous YouTuber when he's older, but in a very humble way. So basically go through and check out some of his older videos. It is actually really respectable kind of where he started and how he moved on, especially what he's doing now. So I would suggest go back, look at some of his videos, and gain some inspiration from his starting points in life. And then you can, take in where he is now. So anyways, that's where I want to end. I hope this video helped you guys with your map continents. As I said, in the future, 3 years from now, I will probably end up doing a redo of this video. But this is my first one, and I'm still kind of getting the hang of actually video making. So, I'm skipping back to my other outro. Out.